The prevailing government and military view was that the scale of operations and the build-up of troops and equipment required would not allow the invasion of Northern Europe to take place before the spring of 1944. Many people, however, had felt frustrated since 1940 by the failure to start this second front. In 1943 there was much speculation about the imminence of the invasion. In June, the Southern Evening Echo headline read, "Amphibious operations on a large scale predicted by Churchill." Another article the same month spoke of mock invasion exercises for the forthcoming invasion of Europe. The increased military activity in the docks fueled local anticipation. In July 1943 the secret Harlequin exercise took place, which determined the port's capacity for troops and equipment for the invasion. The U.S. Army 14th Major Port Transportation Corps arrived in Southampton in July 1943. Initially their headquarters were in the maritime chambers in the old docks, but they later moved to the Civic Centre. The Borough Council granted certain rooms and part of the basement of the Civic Centre free of charge. The 14th Port also had a headquarters on Hoglands Park. Ingrid Peckham in her book, Southampton and D-Day, makes the point that the apparent bias towards the Americans reflects the sheer scale of their involvement in the port, and that by contrast, when the British and Canadian forces were present, tight security restrictions were in place. The main role of the 14th Port in Operation Overlord was to coordinate the shipment of American troops, military equipment and stores through the port. They worked with representatives from Southern Railway, the unions, local traders, government ministers, and the British Army and Navy on port committees.
The nature of the American shipments changed to something clearly indicative of preparation. Preparation for D-Day. England was now well populated with hordes of husky young Yanks. With them came their engines of war in staggering quantities. Southampton's quays and sheds were crammed with discharged cargoes, and all lines were cleared for this vast priority traffic. Other traffic, coal and such like, which had been growing in volume since the fall of France, was sent in coasters to other British ports. Vital supplies for the much-discussed Second Front continued to pour in from the other side of the Atlantic. To a Britain grim and sorely smarting with a sense of rebellion against the Nazi warlords, the apparently inexhaustible supply of American war power acted on the general morale with tonic effect. No longer was vague hope alone the booster of Britain's spirits. She had regained confidence, the confidence that one day democracy would triumph. At our side stood the United States, strong and equally confident. Together we were going to win. To clinch matters at Southampton, the American staff organized for themselves a major port headquarters to deal with all matters of a transatlantic interest.
They were also responsible for vessel salvage and investigating accident liability. There was a 14th Port Provost Corps responsible for policing American troops about the town. After D-Day, the 14th Port landed incoming wounded and German prisoners of war. In the spring of 1944, battalions attached to the 14th Port arrived in the town. Among these were the 499th Port Battalion, which arrived in February bringing mobile dock equipment. In May 1944, stevedores from the 552nd Port Company arrived. This company is recorded in the 14th Port books as being composed of about 200 colored soldiers with white officers. That black soldiers were in segregated units, with separate work details, billets, recreational facilities, and Red Cross clubs. Officers of the 14th Port were billeted in the Polygon Hotel. Enlisted men were initially billeted in Ascupart Road School and later in the Blymont Barracks off Millbrook Road and in camps outside the town, including one in Ashurst. In March 1944, American civilian tug crews, employed by the 14th Port, arrived and were quartered in the dock area. They were to operate some of the tugs used to tow the Mulberry Harbour sections to France. On the 1st of May the U.S. Naval Advanced Amphibious Base arrived in Southampton, setting up headquarters at the Star Hotel. They remained in Southampton until July 1945, providing logistic support for U.S. naval forces in the area, in cooperation with the Royal Navy. Significant changes in the activities at Southampton docks during the latter part of 1943 presaged the nearness of big events. A port headquarters for the U.S. Army was established at the docks, while increasing quantities of military stores and equipment, including guns, tanks, and vehicles of all descriptions arrived in the ships bringing lease-lend materials from the USA. The 14th port stayed in Southampton until November 1946.